But what my dad taught us, I think the most about being an entrepreneur was you control your time. It's not about money. And he showed us at a very, very early age that the biggest benefit of being an entrepreneur was you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I think a lot of people today, unfortunately, are trying to become entrepreneurs to make the money. And they're missing the point.
Welcome to PivotMe, Cameron.
Hey, April, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
So I think what's on everyone's mind, Cameron, is how does one become the advisor to a monarchy? Like, is that a right place, right time thing? Is it a LinkedIn post? I'm just curious about that piece.
A little bit of both. It's right time, right place by design, though. So something I noticed years ago was I ended up flying in business class one day, and then I met this business guy, and I ended up coaching him. I'm like, that was random. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no, everyone sitting in business class is usually running a company or a senior executive, and most of the people sitting in economy aren't. And I realized that the return on investment of paying to be sitting in business versus paying to be sitting in economy, if I chatted with people randomly, not the whole flight, but just got to know them, I would get a return on investment. So I've never flown economy in the last 10 years. I only sit in business class or first. So I was on a flight from Vancouver to Scottsdale. I have a home in each city. And I was sitting beside this woman, and I said, so what do you do? And she goes, I'm the second in command for a large group of companies that's owned by, we could call it a sovereign wealth fund. And I'm like, okay, that's huge. And she goes, how about you? And I said, I've worked with entrepreneurial companies all over the world. I've written a bunch of books. And she said, wait a second. She goes, did you just say 1-800-GOT-JUNK? And I said, yeah. And she goes, is your name Cameron? And I said, yeah. She goes, I heard about you the other day up in Whistler. She goes, is one of your books called Double Double? And I said, yes. And she goes, well, we should talk. So we started talking a little bit more. Turns out she's the second in command to the monarchy, the family that owns the company of Qatar. So QATAR it's an absolute monarchy. They own everything. So they own. So she wanted me to come over and coach them. And I didn't really want to go over to the Middle East because it's a long way. I've been over before, and I didn't really want to have to fly. So I doubled my daily rates, and then said, if you want to pay me, and it was $100,000 for 3 days. So I said, if you want to pay me $100,000, fly me over first class, pay my hotels, pay my food, I'll do it. And she said, okay. She goes, can we wire you 50% next week, and then we'll pay you the rest the day before you come? And I'm like, shit, I should have doubled it again. There's just so much money over there. It's obscene. Yeah. And anyway, that's how it started. So yeah, I went over and did some work with them over there.
Wow. And so was it like business coaching? Is it?
Yeah, I was working with them on, in that case, I was working with them on core values, culture, and some of the people systems, and really getting them to think about across all their businesses, some of the North American systems on people and culture and kind of aligning people with a greater purpose instead of just saying you have to do this. Yeah. And then Sprint was the same thing. I was sitting on a flight from Chicago to Miami, and I was sitting beside this massive entrepreneur, and we were sitting talking, and I diagnosed him as having ADD, bipolar, and being on the spectrum for Tourette's. And he kind of looked at me and goes, how do you know that about me? And I said, I just know entrepreneurs better than anyone on the planet. And I started drawing these diagrams. Turns out he was just getting ready to sell his first company for just over $1 billion to SoftBank. And it was Marcelo Claret, who ended up being worth over $1 billion and then being appointed the CEO of Sprint. He turned around Sprint. So that's when I coached him and his second in command for 18 months. And he's now the CEO of WeWork, trying to turn around WeWork. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you weren't kidding about where you sit on the plane really mattered.
Yeah, totally. Well, I could go on and on about the number of speaking events I've landed, or people that have bought 400 copies of Meetings Suck, or just from sitting in business.
No, I'm reminded of a Bob Hope quote that says, of course I was at the right place at the right time. I put myself there.
Yeah. My dad used to say, you got to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good.
That's good. That's good. I like it. One thing, so kind of just taking it in a different direction, I'm curious on this. So when you're sitting next to the person from the monarchy, and it's not something you've done before, right? So you have a framework that works for businesses, but was there at all like a hesitation? I love kind of pulling on the thread of, okay, you just did something completely different than you had. Was there any hesitation about, okay, I have this framework, will it still apply for a country?
Yeah, see, I don't apply it as a framework. And it's why I will never try to template myself and replicate myself. Like I don't want to have a group of people coaching Cameron systems, or for me, it's very much an art of understanding, and it's why I can charge what I charge, but it's very much an art on me understanding businesses, understanding the idiosyncrasies of the entrepreneurs, and being very careful with who I say yes to. I don't work with government. I don't work with boring blue collar manufacturing. I have to be in my criteria is young, fun, entrepreneurial, high viral, high growth, pre-public. The monarchy was a one-off opportunity. And then Sprint, I just became really, really good friends with this CEO and his wife. I've stayed at both their homes in Kansas City and Miami. I just became good friends with them. And that led into me doing some coaching with the CEO, and then also a year and a half coaching his second in command. But most of my clients would be probably in the $5 to $200 million range.
Okay. Is that a common thing that you become friends with your clients? I've noticed that as kind of a theme.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't want to coach somebody that I can't be friends with, because I'm very much an open, like the way I'm talking to you now is the way I talk on stage. It's the way I talked with Marcelo. It's just, I'm just me. And I don't really, in fact, I've got a bracelet that I wear that says authentic. I just don't. So I have to be friends with them because they're going to get to know me right away anyway. I want to get to know them. Like I actually want to, I'm kind of doing this for fun.
Yeah. Right? Well, because you enjoy it, obviously.
Well, and I get paid for it, which is kind of cool. So, yeah.
Sure. That's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people from the coaching world will say, no, you can't be their, if you're going to be the coach, you can't be their friend. So I love that that's a deviation of, I'm spending a lot of time with these people. I get real and vulnerable. I got to like them.
I'm also less of a coach and more of a mentor.
Okay.
If you think about the consulting kind of spectrum, you've got on the one end coaching, where you use the Socratic method to ask a lot of questions to get them to figure out for themselves.
Sure.
I think a therapist, a therapist can't be friends with their client. But then on the other end, you've got the consultants who you're going to hire to do work for you. I kind of sit in the middle, and I think more as the mentor, you can be good friends with your mentor, right? The mentor is going to call you on your shit, but they're also going to be there to support you and help you and hold your hand, and they're going to be there for you. So I'm very much that kind of trusted advisor who's been there before them. But I don't need to keep an unbiased approach to it. So. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. So let's jump into your backstory a little bit. So one thing that was really fascinating to me is that you were groomed as an entrepreneur, and that's again a little bit of a deviation for me, because most of the entrepreneurs I talked to weren't groomed. They were groomed to be really, really good employees. And so I love that you were groomed, but I'm curious, talk through what that was, like how you were specifically groomed to be an entrepreneur.
Well, it's funny. I hired Elon Musk's brother, Kimball, in 1993. And I remember him telling me that he was told in his business class at Queen's University that he was being groomed as a middle manager at a corporation. And fucking kill. He's like, get me out of here. And he really wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I gave him his first entrepreneurial venture. I hired him as a franchisee for College Pro Painters. I also hired his cousin who built Solar City. But so the grooming wasn't in the school system. In fact, far from it. The school system nearly destroyed me. My father and mother groomed the three of us kids to be entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Both of my grandfathers, one said my grandmother and grandfather were an entrepreneur. They owned their own resort together. My other grandfather was the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company. So we only ever knew business in our family. And then my dad ran his own company for years, and they groomed us. So the three, my brother and my sister and myself, have all owned our own companies for between 15 and 25 years today. Wow. That's all we've ever done. I had my first company when I was 21. I had 12 employees when I was 21. So for 3 years in university, I had a business while I was in university. I graduated with no debt, bought a house, and paid my own way through school. But we were set up that way. But what my dad taught us, I think, the most about being an entrepreneur was you control your time. It's not about money. And he showed us at a very, very early age that the biggest benefit of being an entrepreneur was you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I think a lot of people today, unfortunately, are trying to become entrepreneurs to make the money. And they're missing the point. The money will be there. But if you don't enjoy the free time along the way, you've missed the entire journey. So I don't work nights and I don't work weekends, and I very rarely work Fridays. This is a pretty rare, I've got a half day today, but because I took the last 2.5 weeks off. But I'm very, very careful with my time.
It is the most precious non-renewable resource, right?
When it's also like we're all going to die. Like none of this actually matters. Like we may as well have some fun along the way.
Enjoy it. I imagine that plays into the kind of people that you pick to work with as well.
Yeah, like I mentioned to you before we started that I was in Lake Tahoe and I hung out with Tony Lilios, who is a great entrepreneur, lives in Klein. But for me to meet up with him in coffee, I had to wait for him to get off of his hoverboarding. He was out on the foil, like that surfing foil out on Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
I'm like, how often do you do that? He's like, 5 days a week. And he's like a successful entrepreneur. But the most important thing for him is that being out, spending time with his kids or his hobbies, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss that.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. There's so many things that pull us into believing the reverse model, right? And we forget to put those big rocks in first and just, to use the Stephen Covey concept, you end up filling up your vase with the sand.
Yeah, it makes no sense. You got to work on the important things versus the urgent things. And you got to, as Jim Collins also said, work on the critical few things versus the important many.
Yeah, yeah. And the critical few don't usually bark the loudest. That's the trick, is that they're hard to hear because all the other things are barking so loud that we forget to go, oh yeah, that's right. These things actually don't really matter. It's these things over here that sit quietly in the corner that if you don't address them is a huge lost opportunity.
Yeah, I'll give you a system that I learned years ago from, strangely enough, from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. We used it at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, so I've learned it 20 years ago now. The basic idea is at the end of every day, think about the 5 biggest things you need to do tomorrow and make a list of those 5 big things you need to get done, put them in order of impact 1 through 5, and then first thing in the morning, start working on item 1. And then work on item 2, work on item 3, etc. And don't get into your email and the rest of your business until you get your 5 critical things done.
Yeah.
So I then told that story to a group of entrepreneurs at EO one time, and one of them literally created an app called Commit to 3, because I said, I know that. Well, that was based on me telling the story. I said, I don't like 5, I like 3. So he created an app called Commit to 3. So that's what I now use as my daily accountability for me to figure out what's important. So like, here's my daily top 3 right there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm familiar with that app.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so simple because you have an accountability partner, and whoever sets their goals first, it kind of nudges you to go, oh shit, I should stop working on the busy work and I may as well work on those, as you called it, the things hiding in the corner.
So I have to tell you, I do the same thing. And here's my 3 things right here.
There you go.
I follow this checklist every single day for the same way. So I'm right there with you, Cameron. One thing I want to talk about, so we were talking about the entrepreneurs and being groomed as one. I saw I think it was a TED Talk on raising your kids to be an entrepreneur. And I want to talk about that because I think that people think about that in the theoretical, but what does that actually look like, raising your kids to be an entrepreneur? So shifting gears a little bit. So I have 2 girls. I have a 7 and 9-year-old, and they very much have the entrepreneur flair. But then when you actually try to facilitate that in your kids, what does it look like? So it started out as lemonade stands for us. And now it's evolved, Cameron, into them dragging a table out to our front yard and taking the toys, usually the ones that I bought most recently for like $30 and sticking $3 price tags on it, trying to sell them to, random strangers in our neighborhood. And then I find myself in a situation where I'm going, okay, do I support their entrepreneur endeavors, but also be present so they don't, get kidnapped or something terrible like that? What does it actually look like to encourage entrepreneurism in kids?
Yeah, you just touched on it, and it's my biggest pet peeve with today's set of parents who are trying to encourage entrepreneurship is, if you want your kid to run the lemonade stand, go back in your house and do your own freaking hobby, do your own life, do your own shit, even if you have to just sit and play Candy Crush all day, but let your kids sit out at the end of your driveway and sell lemonade and come back in every half hour, go, nobody's buying. Coach them from inside, let them go back out. But you do your kid no service by standing out behind them, waving people in, because then the kid, like, run your own damn lemonade stand.
Sure.
So what my lessons from so in my TEDx talk that I did 10 or 11 years ago, it's still on the main TED.com website, but raising entrepreneurial kids, I learned from every business venture that I ever had because I was doing it. But the way I learned was my dad would sit down and say, how did it go? What did you learn? So I'd be like, well, I'll give you an example. I was selling license plate protectors. They would slip in behind the license plate to hold the license plate straight. Now we get them from the car dealer, but back in those days, we didn't have them. So everybody's license plates were all crinkled up from parking into whatever. So I remember knocking on this door and the guy said, I don't need one. And I said, well, I saw your car out front is all crimpled. This will keep it straight. And he looked at me and smiled and he said, well, I don't need two. And I said, well, you've got a license plate on the front of your car and a license plate on the back, and you've got your wife's car. So really you need four. And he starts laughing. He goes, I'll tell you what, how about I take one and in 2 weeks you can come back. And I said, let's do this. I'll put one on your car right now and I'll come back in 1 week. And if it's still straight, you buy the other three. And he starts laughing and he goes, okay.
Great negotiation.
I learned how to negotiate.
Yeah.
I learned how to kind of find a middle ground. I learned how to move the deadline up. But my dad made me at 12 or 11 years old think about those lessons. So the way you raise your kids as entrepreneurs is let them do, and because your kid's not going to be selling stuffed animals for the rest of their lives. But if they are, maybe they'll become like a big stuff, maybe they'll understand, right? But then my dad would all of a sudden with my lemonade stand, if it was every weekend, he would start charging me for the Kool-Aid. He would charge me for the sugar. He would rent me the table. I'd have to pay him for it. So I'm like, wait, you didn't rent me last time. He goes, yeah, well, last time was your first time. Now you need to understand costs of goods sold. So I'd come back, I made $5. And he'd go, well, the sugar cost 30 cents. The Kool-Aid cost 20 cents. The table, I'm like, and I realized it would be gone, but I learned. He didn't ever stand outside. I went in and made the Kool-Aid. I spilled it over the counter. I cleaned it up. I brought it outside. I made the shitty little sign. And then I go, nobody's buying. He'd go, well, what's your sign look like? And he'd come out, he goes, do you think that's the best you can do? I'm like, no. So then I'd go back in, I'd make a better sign. But nowadays, moms are sitting in the garage with their kid for 6 days, assembling some cool lemonade stand they bought on fucking Amazon. Like, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, makes total sense. Makes total sense.
So the people learn there's four different parts of the life cycle of learning. The first is the abstract conceptualization. You're going to learn the concept. Then you're going to learn by concrete experience. By active experimentation. That's the role play. Okay. So what's a lemonade stand? How does it work? You talk to your kid about that. They go, okay, I get it. Let's look online. Okay. What might you say when a customer comes? So that's the active experimentation. Let's practice in the house. Then concrete experiences, let them go out and do it. And then reflective observation is when they come back in and you talk to them about it. But you need to let your kids go through, and as adults, you need to go through those four parts of the cycle and then continually loop the learning.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And I think, especially in today's day and age, it's easy to hop in and do it for them, right? It's so easy. It's almost more work in some regards to let them just do it. Like let them go out and fail and get up again. It's almost more work.
I was talking to a CEO about this the other day and I said, when was the last time you rode shotgun with one of your sales guys? He goes, I went out 6 weeks ago. We were 7 minutes into the call. He was screwing it up. So I took it over. I'm like, dude, you missed the opportunity. Like, let him screw up the entire 1 hour call, take notes, go to a second call, let him screw that one up too. Then talk to him after you've watched 2 full 1 hour calls and he screwed up 7 times. But to take it over, he doesn't learn. And you've missed all the other things he's screwing up that when you're not there, he's going to keep screwing up. Yeah. So leadership at times is like zipping it, keeping our eyes open, and then getting the learner to say, all right, we just did a sales call. What went well? What didn't go well? What can you do better next time? Okay, and here's what I saw. Now let's do it again, right? And that's the same with growing your kids.
That's really good language, the learner. I like that. Instead of saying the sales rep that he was training, it's the learner, because that's the position you're in.
Yeah, in every coaching relationship, right? You've got the mentor and the learner, or the mentor and the mentee.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So one of the things that we talk about, switching gears a little bit, one of the things we talk about a lot in PivotMe, as is the name, is sort of on your trajectory here. So where you are today, that usually there is a pivot point, if not many. So in EO language, a lot of times we refer to them as inflection points, but usually in business, sometimes it's personal, where everything changed for us. Like sometimes I was in the corporate world and then I became an entrepreneur. Can you tell us about a time where you had this pivotal moment where everything changed, or you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is not what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I'd say I have 3 or 4, and I'll make them short. The first one was getting involved with college pro painters when I was in university. I bought a franchise and I started running a house painting business at 21 years old. That got me deep into entrepreneurship very quickly. It was probably one of the best. executive learning programs in the world, right up there with Xerox and Procter and Gamble. It was spectacular. Really, really, because every year we hired 800 university students to be franchisees. They then hired 8,000 students to be painters. And in 4 months, we'd do 64 million in house painting, and then we would do it again. And then I went on to the head office team. I was in the top 30 people coaching and training and recruiting franchisees. So for me, it was a 7-year amazing journey. The second one was getting involved in the Entrepreneurs Organization. So that was when I was building out a chain of auto body shops. In the US, it's called Gerber Auto Collision. In Canada, it was Boyd Auto Body. I was the second in command there, and we took that company public, and I left there. And in that time, I was involved in the Entrepreneurs Organization, meeting with all these other really smart under 40 entrepreneurs. And that was my first mastermind. It was when I learned about vulnerability, and I didn't have to be strong at everything. So that got me into the whole mastermind world. 1-800 got junk for sure. Because we built such a massive brand and got all the PR that we got. We landed 5,200 stories in 6 years. So being on Oprah, like that was a real kind of massive, I guess, inflection point. And then lastly was meeting a guy named Yannick Silver / Joe Polish, who really, those two introduced me to a massive, massive world of connectors and influencers. And
Yeah. It's, and I figured you were very familiar with the inflection point exercise, so it'd be an easy one to tackle. And it's interesting how we can have these experiences, have the conversation, or have the meeting with someone, and it sends us on a totally different trajectory. But we've got to be open to it, right? Like
I think the new key is, once you know that concept is there, how do you put yourself into those situations to then launch? So like I'm involved in 4 mastermind groups a year right now. I pay $25,000 a year to go to be in the Genius Network. I pay $10,000 every year to go to the main TED conference. I've gone for 9 years. I've gone to 5 baby bathwater events. I've gone to 7 years of strategic coach. I've gone to War Room. I've gone to, I'm plugged in. And every time I invest in myself by I go to Abundance 360. Every time I go to one of those events, my trajectory changes. In retrospect, you might go, oh, your trajectory changed because you were there. It's like, no, I went there on purpose. I went there to change my trajectory. Because I don't like groups. I'm really nervous in groups.
Okay.
I would rather stand on a stage of 1,000 people than go to a networking group.
And yet you do it all the time.
So because I know that every time I put myself there, I get a 10 to a 100x return.
Wow.
Like when I invest $25,000 in the Genius Network, I easily get $250,000 either in new business or ideas. Easy.
When you go to those events, do you have a really clear goal on, okay, I'm going to this event and my intention is to get X amount of business or make X amount of connections?
I go in with 3 things. Who are the 3 new people I want to meet? Who are the 3 current people that I know that I want to spend time with? And what are the 3 needs, like areas that I want to get better at that I can enter into a conversation? So like right now I'm working on building out an online model. So I'm talking to lots of people about online models, continuity programs, landing, so I go into those 3 intentions: who new, who current, and what can I learn about?
Yeah. You mentioned in there when you're talking about the events that you're going to, vulnerability. And I remember watching a talk that you did recently. Well, no, you did the talk probably a while ago, but I saw it recently. And it was, hey, I've got this event, and I think it was a group of COOs, and one guy wasn't showing up to the conference because he had imposter syndrome. And we talk about imposter syndrome a lot on the show, so people are very familiar with it. And I love that you said, okay, who else is struggling with it? Who else is struggling with, am I ready for this role? Am I worthy to be in this room? I love that you tackled that. And talking about embracing vulnerability. And this is something that we've talked about in the past. How do you balance, I mean, you probably know where I'm going with this. How vulnerable should a leader be? Because people want to follow the guy with the plan, right? So you got to be the guy with the plan. But then how much vulnerability do you bring to the table with your team, and so that there's trust and they're identifying with your humanness, but they also have confidence in your ability to lead and have the plan? Yeah.
So the leader has to be strong on the vision, but doesn't have to be strong on how to get there.
Okay.
When you explain, if you give that to your team though, just like that, then they think you might be weak. So you give it to them in an analogy, they see the strength in it. So for me, the analogy is this: I'm a homeowner. I want to build a home. I know what I want my home to look like. I know how I want it to feel. I know what the kitchen needs to look like, but I don't know how, nor do I want to learn how to do the electrical, the plumbing, put up walls and build a foundation and put in the roof.
Sure.
I don't want to learn it. I don't know how to do it, but I want to hire a bunch of really smart people who know how to make my vision come true.
Mm-hmm.
The leaders that are the most scary are the ones that have no idea where they're going, and they're running around barking orders and nobody knows what we're building. It's like, are we building a house? Are we building a tree fort? Are we just practicing cart construction? Like, what the hell are we doing here?
Sure.
I don't know. And they're always flitting around. So that's the scarier part. So I think you can be vulnerable with, I don't know how to do this, as long as you're very, very clear on where you're going and what it looks like and how you're going to get there. So that's why I created that concept of the vivid vision, that 4 or 5 page written document describing the future of your company. I covered in 3 of my books. And if you can describe what your company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years from today, that gives your team a lot of confidence that, yeah, you're not supposed to know how to do all of it. I'm going to delegate everything except genius.
So I love the concept of the vivid vision. And can you expand on that a little bit? And also how often you're communicating that to your team?
Sure. So the idea of the vivid vision is based on science of visualization that athletes use, where they visualize themselves performing the event, or like a homeowner who can see what the home will look like, but the contractor understands the vision well enough to create the plans and then hand the plans to the employees, and the employees can build the home without ever talking to the homeowner. The entrepreneur usually has a vision of what they want their company to look like. So the basic idea is to lean out into the future, 3 years out. So let's say you go December 31st, 3 years from today, and you're looking at almost as if you're walking around your company, virtual and in person. You describe the meetings, maybe 3 or 4 bullet points. You describe the leadership team, maybe 3 or 4 bullet points. You describe what your customers are saying about you, what the media is writing about you, what your suppliers say about you. You describe IT and finance and engineering and operations and sales. You describe your core values and the culture, and you describe it without knowing how it happened, but you describe your company as if it's this living, breathing organism 3 years from today. That ends up becoming a 4 or 5 page rough document that you hand to a copywriter, and the copywriter can polish it and make it pop off the page.
Sure.
Then you add some graphic design elements to it so it looks and feels like your brand. It becomes a 4 or 5, 6 page maximum PDF that you hand to every employee. And then you walk all the employees through it and get them reading it and thinking about what sentence are they most inspired about making come true. And then over time, you build the plans to make it unfold. What I like doing is having every customer, every supplier, all of my employees read it every quarter. So I get, that way we're always thinking about the future, but executing on today.
And when you communicate that, I imagine if you start to get out of alignment with that, you probably got a few people that will remind you, hey, I thought this is where we were going.
Yeah, you'll also get a few people that'll go, I don't like what the future looks like. I'm going to leave. Perfect. It's the right time to go, because that is what we're building.
Yeah.
And then everybody else all of a sudden goes, oh, now I understand why we're doing this project. Or now I understand why you're so obsessed about core values. Or now I understand where this strategically fits. Like, they see the bigger picture for all of the stuff that we're doing, and it becomes like a home that gets built up from the ground up.
Sure. You get the buy-in, and it's interesting because at this size business that we typically deal with, people have they're wearing multiple hats. They're really focused on just the day-to-day. And sometimes it's hard to schedule, offsite meetings and really get clarity on where you're going, because you're so busy with the day-to-day. And it's just it's a reminder of that can be the kiss of death. You can be so busy that you run yourself right out of business when you don't have that clear vision.
A lot of these entrepreneurial companies, when you're small, when you're like the 30 to 60, 70 employees, you can get very distracted by stuff that seems important or seems urgent. But it's almost like installing the cabinets in your kitchen before the electrical and the plumbing and walls have been put up.
Sure.
We'll get to the Wolf stove, but let's get the foundation built, right? Let's get the walls put up. Let's get the electrical and plumbing put in. And we always want to look at the kitchen, but we're not ready to get to the kitchen yet. Like, it'll come.
Yeah. So in that same vein, so what are you seeing if you're looking at the things that people are doing, entrepreneurs are doing, and you're going, man, I wish they would do this. They keep working on X and they need to be focused on Y. What is that?
I'll give you what I call the secret formula. And it's F times E equals success. The first F is focus. And it's how focused are you? How focused is your team? How focused is your strategy? So let's say that you decide to give yourself a percentage rating of somewhere between 1 and 100% focused for the month or the quarter or the week. It focused on your right psychodemographic profile. Are we focused on the plan? Am I focusing on my goals, or am I getting distracted with social media? Am I getting distracted with what I just read in some random book? Am I getting distracted by, the news? So you give yourself a percentage rating on focus.
Okay.
The second F is faith. And it's how much faith do you have in yourself, your team, your marketing, your strategy, your product, your business, your coach, etc. And you have to protect your confidence. You have to protect your team's confidence, so that we're going, like, it's almost like in the military where they go, hell yeah, and they just start running forward. Like, you can't have any wavering or you die.
Yeah.
So you give yourself a percentage score there on faith. How much faith? Between 1 and 100% on faith. And then the E is effort. And it's how much effort are you putting in? Like, are you really working? Is it? And effort isn't the number of hours, but it's that flywheel approach to really, really putting the effort into the things that matter, that are going to create momentum, and giving yourself or your company a rating on effort. Well, let's say you came up with 50% focused times 50% faith times 50% effort. That only yields a 12.5% chance of success. If you go 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5 is 12.5% chance of success. Those are shitty odds.
Yeah. Even
if you get to 80% focus times 80% faith times 80% effort, that's a 51.2% chance of success. That's 50-50. You might as well take all your cash and go to Vegas and put it on red or black.
Yeah.
Right. So most people go like, oh, I'm doing well. I'm 90% focus times 90% faith times 90% effort. That's a 72.8% chance of success. A 25% chance of blowing up. The reason we built 1-800-GOT-JUNK was we were obsessively focused. We turned the company into a cult. So the faith was super high. And we were cranking everybody. We were about 98%. If you're 98% focus times 98% faith times 98% effort, that's a 94% chance of success. Yeah. So that's where most entrepreneurs go off the rails, is they're missing on those three areas.
Yeah. It's deceptively simple, isn't it?
Well, business is simple. Like, I have a set of rules called the grandmotherisms on a book that I'm working on right now, but it's like everything grandmother told us is true. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Treat people how you want to be treated. Like every rule is simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are like a fly. They're all trying to get out the window, and they're going to work harder until they get out. But there's a door. It's open. Just turn, go out the door.
That's a good analogy.
So freaking simple.
It's so true.
These flies right here, they're dead. And I every day. I'm like,
these are entrepreneurs with great ideas that didn't execute effectively.
I don't know what you're doing there.
So you know what? Let me ask you this. What are you seeing out there that's total bullshit? Whether that's advice or practices, what do you go, God, why are people doing this?
One is, the world is littered with coaches who have never run a business or built a business and have no business telling other people how to do theirs. Okay. There's a lot of, including lifestyle, there's a lot of like, oh, I'm a lifestyle coach. Fuck, you're 26 years old. You've done shit. You don't even have a kid yet. Like, I don't think you have any right to coach anybody on their life until you've had a family or some tragedy. Like, you've never, like, it's so easy to have the perfect day when it's just you and your boyfriend and you're living in San Diego. It's like, come on, stop. So I think it's very dangerous for people to get pulled into a coaching model or a coaching program or a mastermind group with people that have never done it before.
Sure.
There's a lot of people getting into the kind of flip business where they're not really adding value. It's very opportunistic. There's a low shelf life on opportunistic.
Okay.
You constantly have to be iterating. You have to sell what your customers are buying.
Sure.
So I guess that would be another one.
Yeah. It's a good
I'm a little frustrated for people with the amount of content out there and the amount of random learning people are doing without applying it as well.
We were talking about that at the beginning.
I have a good friend of mine, I won't say his name, who tells you to read a book a week. And I'm like, I disagree. I vehemently disagree. Because you have no time to put all those ideas in place. So A, it's taking up your time. It's taking your 6 hours to listen to it or read it. B, you don't have time to put it all in place. C, when you read all those cool things, it then adds more stress to your life because you're worried you're not doing all those things. D, most of that learning isn't even attached to what you want to be learning about. So what you want to do is learn about what you're working on this quarter. So think about your quarter's goals, think about your projects, and then listen to podcasts, read books, go to masterminds about those things. That at least focuses your learning. But just reading more business books for the sake of reading business books, unless you're a kid really wanting to just expand your universe, I think is a very big waste of time for most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you know, as you said that, Cameron, what I thought of is instead of, I emphatically agree, we were just talking about that before we went live. I think a good way to flip that is instead of read a book a week, apply a book a month.
Yeah, like take stuff.
Simple switch.
Actually, yeah, like I've had people like, oh, I've seen you speak 3 times. Your stuff is so great. I'm like, do you have a vivid vision? No, not yet. I'm like,
stop blocking my stuff.
Yeah, like 1-800 stuff. Wow, you got so lucky. No, we had a 2000, 2003, 2006, and 2009 vivid vision that I was executing. Like, we didn't get lucky. We made that happen.
Luck isn't any part of it. So, you know what, let me, thinking about our current environment right now, let's quickly touch on the current environment related to COVID, right? Related to what's going on right now. And I don't want to necessarily immerse ourselves in either the politics or the practices or anything like that, more around, which it's sad that I have to separate out politics, but that's for another conversation. More around what are you telling the businesses that you work with on how best to navigate this season? So is it, hey, if there is some more space, you know, this is a time to change your systems or retrain your staff or launch a learning management system, change your CRM? Is it around that? Is it, hey, this is the time to push ahead because while others are kind of doing the C game, you got to push ahead? What advice are you giving to businesses in this season?
Well, it's funny. I've actually been doing a lot of Zoom events recently. Groups are booking me to speak over Zoom on how to grow when it's slow. And it's all of the best systems that I used to navigate the 87, 88 recession, the 2000 stock market meltdown, and then 2008 global financial crisis. I was running companies through all of those. I kind of packaged up the best systems to grow when it's slow or grow during an economic downturn or grow during uncertainty.
That's huge.
I'll give you a few off the top. One is the speed of the leader, speed of the group. The leader has to decide where they're going because followers are dying to follow someone right now. So it's a good plan violently executed now is better than the perfect plan next week, right?
Did you just say violently executed? That's my favorite phrase. I love it.
That's a General Patton quote. Yeah, it's literally about like have a fucking plan and roll it out and we'll follow you.
We use it all the time. That's literally I just love that you said that because someone's like, can we get shirts that say violent execution? I'm like, I feel like it's going to have a different connotation. But anyways, yes, I love it.
The next one is that if you think about an average, right? I had a client say, well, the average company in my space is going to go down by 30% this year. And I said, that's cool. But I said, to be average, I said, you know, your income level is in the top 1% of all in the US. Your health is in the top 1%. And your business is in the top 5% of all businesses in your industry. You're already in the top 5.
Stop talking about average.
So to be average, you could be down 70, down 50, down 30, up by 10 or up by 30. Where do you want to be to create the average? He goes, oh, we should be up by 30. We literally shifted the discussion. They were making plans to be down by 30, a $50 million company making plans to drop by 30%. Now they're making plans to be up by 30. I did a check-in with them yesterday. They're currently on trend for up 26% for the year. We've got 2 other acquisitions that we're working on that'll put us way over the top. And so he's trying to buy a bunch of businesses right now that are slow. So, you know, really focusing on your growth, deciding to be ahead of that curve, investing in marketing and sales right now because no one else is. When everyone pulls back, marketing is cheaper than it's ever been right now. Or it's certainly cheaper than it's been in the last 5 years. So when you can start buying it or renegotiating, just those kinds of things. Yeah,
that's great. That's a great point. And don't do the wait and see game.
Well, and also like the reality is for most of us, a global crisis isn't, you're not General Electric, for God's sakes. You're not a global company. You know, you're selling in Dallas or you're selling in, you know, Kansas City or you're selling in Vancouver. Like get off your ass and go tell people your product or service is good and they'll use you.
Yeah.
But stop reading social media and worried about all the worry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. One thing you mentioned earlier about the guy that you're sitting next to on the plane and being able to identify, I think it was bipolar and ADHD. Talk to me about how that's a superpower. You referenced it as your superpower and how common it is among C-suite.
Right. So first off, bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder has been nicknamed by the medical community as the CEO disease. So most entrepreneurial CEOs are on the spectrum for bipolar. In my book Double Double, in chapter 12, I talk about the traits of bipolar disorder. There's 11 core traits. And if you end up with 5 of them, you're on the spectrum. If you end up with 10 or 11 of the traits, you're clinically diagnosed as bipolar. I have 10.
Wow.
I probably have 11, but I certainly have 10. So the mania is the energy of why people follow us, right? The manic depression of bipolar. Well, you don't find a lot of engineers and accountants and lawyers and teachers that are exciting. They're kind of flat.
Yeah.
So when they see these entrepreneurial kids, they think he's too wired, he's too crazy, he's too energetic. Fuck, that's a leader. Everybody's following him. He's distracting people. So the mania is that high energy. The stress and depression is simply us burning out, right? And what happens to entrepreneurs, we can't tell our employees that we're scared. We can't tell our spouse that we've mortgaged the house to get the business to the next quarter. We can't tell our spouse that we're not taking payroll. We can't tell our employees that we don't know what we're doing. We're recruiting some amazing star from another company. Meanwhile, we're trying to figure out how to meet payroll the next Thursday.
Yeah.
That's a magnitude, and none of our friends understand what the fuck we're doing. Like, why is he always in business? Well, because you have a job and I don't. Like, so the magnitude of stress that we're under really kind of exasperates the mania and the depression or stress.
Yeah.
So it's understanding how to ride that roller coaster, because you can't get off of it. It's key.
Yeah.
The second big entrepreneurial trait. So the mania is a superpower because we can get sales teams and marketing people and PR people to follow us and do what we want. We can get
them fired up too.
Right? They'll invest in our ideas. The next one is attention deficit disorder.
Okay.
And the reason these are all called disorders is because we're not like doctors. Doctors have labeled them a disorder because it's different from them.
Sure.
I've never found a doctor who's very inspiring. I've never found a doctor who's very energetic. I've never found a doctor who sees everything that's going on because they're so myopically focused on the one or two things. So what I have is more like an attention deficit strength. I see everything. I see what time it is. I see what's happening with the economy, the market, my suppliers, my customers. I kind of see the trends. I see the patterns. I notice the mistakes. And because I'm seeing everything, I can't focus on it for very long. So to get it fixed, because it bugs me, because I'm seeing it, it bugs me. Sure. I have to delegate it quickly. Well, that causes growth. But the teachers don't want you to delegate stuff. They want you to do it all yourself. But you can't do it all yourself to have a business.
You can't scale it.
So what they see as a disorder is actually a superpower.
And how do you help people recognize that, both in themselves and in their kids?
The first one I try to get them to do is to recognize they have the traits and it's okay. And if they see, oh, shoot, you mean like Richard Branson and Steve Jobs and Henry Ford and 2 of the founders of Netscape are bipolar and have ADD? Oh, so Ted Turner, so maybe they're not disasters. Like, would you have ever wanted Steve Jobs not to be hypomanic?
Yeah.
He never would have created it, right?
Yeah.
And he had to be like so driving and so stubborn to get through all the adversity. The teachers would be like, no, you should stop now.
Yeah.
Why? Because there is no right, there's no box. We're talking about get out of the box. I haven't found the box yet. I don't know where to get it. I'd like to get it.
That also speaks to your peer group and how important it is to be around the right kinds of people, because everyone will be looking at you. And this is a conversation we have in the mastermind a lot, is that if you're a business owner, for God's sakes, hang out with other business owners, because a W-2 in the US, they're not going to understand the way your brain works. I talk about business all the time. Why? I love business. I eat, breathe, and sleep business. I love other things too, but I love business. And so if I'm sitting at a party where I'm sitting next to a good friend who's an accountant, you're mentioning accountants, and the next is a vet, and the next one's a pharmacist. My friend who's a veterinarian, he makes a mistake all the time. I go, how's business? And I let him go 2 questions deep, and then I just unleash, because it's good. He's like, oh, anything new happening? And then I just turn, well, Andy, let me tell you about it. And I just start going off on, because I'm pumped and I'm fired up about business. You need to, and he's great. Like he asks all the right questions, and I appreciate that. But I need to be around other business owners because they get how your brain works.
Well, and let me qualify that. We need to be around the other business owners that are positive top 5% that are investing in their own growth, that are investing in their businesses, because there's a lot of business owners out there that are on the bottom half of that average.
Sure. I just want to commiserate.
They're negative, right? Misery loves company, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to grow. They're worried. They're panicked. They're negative. Dude, I'll tell you, like in the 2008, 2009 global financial crisis, there's a lot of companies that made a ton of money. And there's a lot of companies that did poorly. So no, I don't really want to just be around other business owners. I want to be around other heart-centered business owners, other fun business owners, other positive business owners, others that are growing that are investing in their growth. So I tend to follow the ones that are that energy.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah. So being cognizant of who you're spending your time with, both entrepreneurs.
It's like going to a bar. Like, you want to hang out with the people in the bar? No, I don't want to hang out with the angry drunk at the bar. I want to hang out with the people that are fun and having a good time at the bar.
For sure.
Right. But they're all there. You got to pick which group you're going to spend time with.
And that takes a lot of planning. I really want to emphasize that for the listeners, because most of us spend time with the people we live next to, the people we work next to. You're not designing an exceptional life when you do that, because those are friends by default. That's a social circle by default. You have to seek those out. So one thing we talk about here is a future friends list. As cliche as that sounds, we should all have a future friends list of people that we want in our circle. You got to design that.
I'm laughing because I have a number of lists, and my list, I have my friends in Phoenix dinner party list, my tennis playing list, my skiing list. Because I forget, I'll be like, I'm sitting around one day, I'll be like, oh, I wish I could go skiing. I'm like, oh, wait, I got to list a whole bunch of people I know that ski. Oh, I should ping so-and-so, because I forget.
Same thing. I got a mountain bikers list. So Cameron, I see why Ryan and I said we need to meet, because he's like, you got to meet Cameron. But I'm looking at mine right now, and I've got a list for the same reason. So whether that's business owners, whether that's, I love mountain biking, I've got a list of people that it's like, if I want to go do a trail, if I want to go up to Tahoe and bike, there's my list of people. Or, if you're doing a new workout program, oh, I've got a friend that is an amazing power lifter. How about I spend some time with her? That'll fire me up. I love it. I love it. One thing I want to go back to is great. This is such great information. One thing I want to go back to is you're talking about, hey, I went through these hard times, these economic downturns. And that is so important, because a lot of people can't speak to that. And so when COVID first hit, we did a bunch of live interviews, one every day for probably 2 weeks with a bunch of business owners. And it was amazing, Cameron, when you're talking to a business owner. I don't necessarily want to tie it to age, but we'll say younger in the process, maybe.
If you're 32 years old as a coach, you've never been through shit.
Never been through it.
If you were 21 when the global financial crisis hit. Well, 11 years ago, I was coaching 16 CEOs through it.
Yeah.
So 20 years ago, when the NASDAQ fell by 78%, you were 13, not you, but like you, coach, were 12 years old.
Sure.
I had 300 employees.
Yeah. It's a very different experience.
That's why you want a mentor who's been there through stuff versus a coach who's going to ask you a bunch of questions and give you a bunch of advice based on nothing. It's a really dangerous time to be taking advice. And I also don't give advice, I give experiences.
Like an experience share.
What my experience was, kind of the Gestalt protocol, so that people can learn from my experiences and take with it what they want, versus telling them what I think they should do. Sure. Yeah, you usually get much better results in that regard.
But I think that it's so important to listen to the people that have been through these economic downturns, through these hard times. I'm thinking about one of the guys I interviewed was a client of mine, Al Klein, and he runs an appraisal business and has for 30 years. And listening to his perspective of, it's very successful. He's grown it a lot. And he's like, look, we're still growing. Real estate's still going to go ahead. And this is very early on, where a lot of people are like, do we continue to buy? Do we buy in residential? Do we buy in commercial? Everything should just come to a screeching halt. Now Al's going, no, it doesn't. I've been here. We've been through this many, many times. And just hearing his perspective was so good. I heard so many responses from listeners saying, we need to hear more Al's right now, because they've been like, they've cut their teeth on times like this. They've navigated teams and businesses through times like this. And we get to the other side, guys. I know it's scary, but we get to the other side. And this may not even be the worst of what so many people have seen. And those people really need a microphone right now. We need to hear from those people.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. We do hard things. We get through hard times.
I'm going to give you a random tip that I just thought of while you were speaking that I think is really important right now. I heard this saying years ago. I think it was Jack Daly who said it. If anyone listening right now running a business of 5 million or greater, or 3 million or greater, let's say you've got like 10 employees or more. If you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. And think about that for a second. If you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. The amount of things that are on your plate that somebody could do for a fraction of what you make, you got to get all that busy work off your plate. So the current one that I'm delegating to my EA, who's been with me for 4.5 years, she's my 5th EA over 20 years, is email. She's going to start triaging my entire inbox. A system that I talk about, Inbox Zero, and how to manage it. But I don't need to be the one going through my inbox, deciding who to reply to, because she can handle half of them. Deciding which ones to unsubscribe to, she knows those. Deciding who to delegate stuff to, she can figure that out too. There's only probably 10% of my emails do I even need to think about. And then she can let me which ones I need to think about today and which ones I can look at Thursday or Friday. So the amount of stuff, like I don't even check myself in for flights, let alone, I haven't booked travel for years, but my boarding card just comes to my phone 6 hours or 12 hours before my flight because she checks me in.
She handles all of that.
Yeah, that saves the 3 hours, the 4 hours a day, or three or 4 minutes. But all of those things are huge.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I love that line about if you don't have an EA, you are one. And it's critical. It's so critical. A lot of times, one thing that we've talked about on the podcast before is people always say, well, I can do that myself. And I always say, no. You don't ask, can I do it? You're resourceful. You can do just about anything. Should I do that? That's the question.
You can clean your own toilets and wash your own floors too, but you don't.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's a really, really good point. Well, one thing I was thinking about earlier is this is kind of in a different direction. So less about business owner, but just in the positioning yourself and your business well in the marketplace. I noticed that you have a really strong personal brand. Has it always been that way? Did you purposely design your personal brand? And did you do it yourself? Did you hire a company? Talk to us about personal brand.
A few parts. So when I was at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we were in about our 2nd year of building the company, and Brian wouldn't give equity to anyone. I realized that my biggest equity play that I could build there was everyone knowing that I built the company, right? It couldn't be Brian by himself. It needed to be Brian and Cameron. And there was more people on the team, but I needed people to know what I did.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do PR. I wanted to speak to the press. I wanted to do media interviews. I wanted to do speaking events. So it was a very cognizant design of me building my brand attached to it and attached to the other 3 companies that I built.
And your role in that role, that you were a COO in that position, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was second.
Which doesn't always have a personal brand unless you intentionally grow it.
In most cases, it doesn't. In fact, that's why I started the Second in Command podcast. I've heard all the CEO stories. I want to interview their COO.
Sure.
Right. I want to hear the rest. So we've got the COO of Shopify, the COO of Bumble. We always hear from their CEO, but we don't hear their story. So so my personal brand was starting to get built then by design, because I knew when I left, it would transition the amount of value I could charge for. And then when I started coaching CEOs and entrepreneurs, I've done about 600 speaking events, 6 continents now. So just me speaking all over the world and being paid to speak all over the world has really brought my brand up. So I needed a website, and then my clients wanted a book. So I wrote Double Double, and it took off and was really successful. So I wrote 4 others. So all of those things were by design. And then, yes, I did pay a company who, if anybody wants, if they look at the CameronHerold.com, if you like that website, I can introduce you to the group that did it for me. It's called Influx. They're amazing to work with. They definitely did a really, really good job at really understanding who I was and how to communicate that to connect with my clients.
Sure. Cameron, I have a couple follow-up questions, but I want to be cognizant of our time. Do you have a few minutes?
I actually have a buffer that I'm okay on right now. Okay,
perfect. So we were just talking about your role in the COO, the role of a COO. Let's clarify exactly what that is, what the role is, and also at what size, if it's a size standard, at what point does someone need to consider bringing on a COO if they don't already have one?
Right, size doesn't matter, right? So Harvard wrote an article. I know, right? You just like you threw it there, so I'm like,
I know. I wanted to say, yeah, guys always say that.
yeah,
Then cut that out of the podcast.
no, you don't. You leave that one in. So I think it was about 17 years ago, Harvard wrote an article called "The Misunderstood Role of the COO,"
Okay.
and they identified 7 distinct types of chief operating officers. So you have kind of the heir apparent, or you have the MVP, or you have the change agent, or you have the most valuable, or you have the partner. It's very different. So at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, as an example, I came in as really the one who knew how to franchise a company.
Okay.
So I really had the domain expertise of franchising. So Brian had no idea how to do any of it. Now he does, but back then he would publicly say, he's like, I had no idea how to do anything Cameron wanted to do. So that was the partner, was he got to do the stuff that he needed to do, and I got to do what he didn't know how to do. It was a partnership. In other cases, you've got kind of the technical founder, right? Or you might have someone to oversee, finance, because you suck at finance. So it's really the yin and yang with the CEO. It's the person who can do everything the CEO doesn't want to do and sucks at. A really, really high trust and relationship. That's the best way to describe what a COO is. Okay. Now, a COO is just the biggest title for the second in command role, because it could be a general manager, it could be an operations manager, it could be a VP of operations, right? So let's say that you're a 10-person company. You shouldn't have any CEO, C-level titles. You shouldn't have a chief marketing officer. You shouldn't have a chief financial officer. You shouldn't have a chief technology officer. God forbid you have a chief revenue officer, which is now the C-level title for the head of sales.
Yeah. And I got to point out, most smaller companies do that. They overtitle to compensate for lesser salaries. So I just got to point that out.
Here's what happens. They put a big title in to compensate for lesser salaries, but then everybody wants more and they show all the demand. So you end up paying more than you should.
Sure.
Second thing is you end up creating like creep where they think that they're more valuable they are, or they think you're supposed to be good more than they are. And third, there's nowhere for them to grow to. So I don't even like giving out VP titles. If I'm a 10-person company, everybody gets director titles or manager titles. You get to the 30 or 100 person, at the 100-person mark, we can give out VP titles. At the 300-person mark, you can give out the C-level titles.
That's really good, because again, I want to point out that's not what most people do with small companies.
Well,
and then they end up on salary.com saying, well, hey, CMO is supposed to be making XYZ. And to your point, then they want more money.
Baby boomers have really, really wanted to be liked by their kids, and they really want to be liked by their employees. And the baby boomers in Gen S, so the oldest baby boomer is currently 73 or 74, and then the youngest baby boomer is 56. So that group is starving to be liked, and we're also worried about getting kicked out of our companies. So we really so we'll give away whatever we want. We've forgotten how to say no. Like, yeah, you want 6 cookies before dinner? Yes, as long as you love me. Like, you need a BMW? Okay, have that. Sure. So then Gen Y has gotten very, very good at asking for stuff, even equity. Like 20 years ago, to get equity in a company, you had to buy it on the stock market. But from 97 to 2000, companies gave away equity in lieu of compensation because we didn't have all the investment dollars in the .com. They attracted a whole bunch of good talent and then when the market blew up in March of 2000 through October, all of a sudden employees needed to get paid as well because equity wasn't worth anything, but they still wanted equity too. So then we started giving them salaries and equity. And now what's happened over the last 17 years, we're giving salaries, equity, and titles to a very entitled group of people that often don't have the experience to wipe their ass. But they have the confidence that have somehow sold us on, oh, they're really confident, I'll give them a VP title. Yeah, but they don't know what they're doing. They haven't done it.
Yeah.
It's really dangerous.
Yeah, I could see that.
And expensive.
Sure. So that was, I love how you broke it down, 10-person director level. You have to be at this level to get the VP level, this many employees. I think that's a really good guideline.
I see transition points at the 1s and 3s, from 1 employee to 3 employees to 10 to 30 to 100 to 300, or 100,000, 300,000, 1 million, 3 million, 10 million, 30 million, 100 million. Tend to be natural inflection points on the kind of maturity of a business and the evolution of a business and the complexity of the business.
Sure. So what I just heard is size does matter, Cameron,
Yeah,
is what I heard.
does matter.
All right. Just make sure I want to get it on record and leave that in.
Close that loop.
Just want to come back to original.
Touche.
So one thing about being an entrepreneur one question I love to ask is, we talked a little bit about this, I think, before we came on, which is, what does being an entrepreneur allow you to do? So a lot of times people talk about the struggle, but there's much more than struggle. And if you design it well, there's much more than struggle. What do you get to do?
I take 8 to 10 weeks vacation every year. I haven't worked a weekend in 10 years. I don't work nights. I shut down at 5 o'clock because I'm never going to get it all done, and I can delegate it. So it gives me my free time. It gives me control of my time. If I want to take off time in the middle of the day to go hang out with people or golf, I just do. I just tell I don't have to ask, which there's a lot of power and fun in that. I mean, you get to write off a lot of stuff through the business, so you get additional write-offs and expenses. It gives you control of your own destiny.
Yeah.
Like, you get to decide. No one delegates to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Cameron, have you always had this good of balance, or did you have to teach yourself that?
I had to burn out twice to get it. So 20, no, I'm not kidding. 20 years ago next month, I was written up in the Wall Street Journal as one of 4 supernovas whose careers went really, really high during the .com and crashed. And I burned out with stress. I can show you a picture. I weighed 39 pounds heavier than I do right now 20 years ago. This is a photo of me 10 years ago where you won't even recognize it. It's disgusting. Yeah, I was drinking. I wasn't getting any exercise. I was eating like shit.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? That's just
a
different human being. But I thought I was successful, but I was in complete burnout. So, and then the other one was my kids. One time, one of my kids kind of went I had my phone up and I was talking to him, and he went like this, and moved my phone away. Like, he wanted attention. Those little things were the ones that made me realize, and then my mom dying, there's been a number of things, right? You just realize none of this matters. This is just what we do to make money.
Those sound like pivot points, Cameron.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Just recognize it, because I was going to say, when it comes to balance, that's something that's not inherent in entrepreneurs. The hustle is tend to be inherent, and the hustle is celebrated, right? Well, and what you're talking about is something very different and much more balanced.
It is, and that is where a coach or a mentor can shake them a little bit, or crisis can shake them a little bit. But the sad thing is, no one actually wants to hear about your work either. If I'm at a cocktail party, nobody wants to hear about my coaching or my speaking or my books or the COO Alliance, and I don't want to hear about their accounting practice or their teaching. I don't give a shit. What I want to hear about is, what are your passions? Where did you go mountain biking? Hey, I just tried mountain biking downhill for the first time at Park City. I was scared. It was fun. You want to talk about that more than you want to talk to me about who I coached. Yeah. So if that's all we have as our, and do you really want your child, when you're dying, or when somebody said to your kid, what's your dad do, or what's your mom do, and your kid described work? That's horrible. I would love my kids, if somebody said, what's your dad do? I'd like my kids to say he golfs, he plays tennis, he hikes, he hangs out with friends, he cooks dinners, he drinks wine. Oh, what does he do to make money? Oh, he does speaking and books, but yeah, he's all about golf and teach.
Wow. That's a big shift from what most people are doing.
Most people aren't in design of their lives. They're waking up and then they're going to die. It's sad.
I'm responding to triggers.
I'm also very, very European in my mindset. Last year I went to 14 countries. Just as part of my normal travel and vacation time, I went to 14 countries last year. Yeah. When you look at the North Americans are all waking up and working. Europeans wake up and live. And then they fit work into that a little bit, but they work to live. They don't live to work. For sure. It's a big difference. Yeah. So I think that's been a big part of it for me as well. Sure. So let me ask you this. Best movie of all time. What do we got? Sound of Music is always. Yeah, I know. I'm a guy. Didn't see that comment. We did say the European thing, so maybe, I guess. I've always loved the music. I've always loved the story. I've always loved the, I've always loved it. I really like Moulin Rouge as well, because I think the artistry and the costumes and the songs and the story are amazing in that. But no, it's definitely Sound of Music. I'll be darned. Did not see that one coming. All right.
All right. So what's next for you? What's next on the docket for Cameron?
So building the COO Alliance for sure. That's the
Okay.
focus. Working on an online component of it right now. An online model for the COO Alliance is a big one. But really life, my youngest son goes away to university in 13 months. My oldest son is there now. So I'm actually preparing to start living globally. I'll probably tax base out of either Estonia or Portugal, because I'm Canadian, so I don't have the US all over my worldwide income.
Sure.
So I'll go to a tax zone where I can have 10% total tax. I have about 30 countries that I want to live 1 to 3 months per city in. So I have a list of all these cities where I'm just going to start hopping around for do that for about 5 years. And figure out after that what I want to do.
Where you settle after that. I love it.
Or if I settle. I'm not sure that I really want to settle. I think I actually want to live globally and just decouple from stuff, but really kind of attach to experiences. Like I want to go live in these cities, you know, I'll bring up Barcelona or Amsterdam. I love Amsterdam. I want to go live in Amsterdam, but I want to know the coffee shops. I want to know the cafes. I want to walk into the restaurant and have them call me by name. I want to know the winding streets around the canal areas and know exactly where I'm turning in the Jordan. And I want to know the other neighborhoods. And I want to be so familiar that I go, I know the city. And then after 3 months, I want to pack up. I want to go do it in Barcelona. And then I want to go do it in Prague. And then I want to go do it in, you know, like I really want to live. I want to go live in Chamonix. I want to go live in Kitzbühel. I want to go live in these places.
Will you write about them? Will that be part of this, or just experience them?
I'll definitely speak in all of them because I'm lucky that I've got these networks with EO and YPO globally that I can pretty much guarantee myself a speaking event in every city that I live in, which really, if I do it right, can pay for the entire journey. So I really want to slow down, you know, the other parts of my businesses as well. A lot more passive income.
This is just for selfish purposes because I'm a big traveler myself, and I struggle every time people ask that question, but I'm gonna ask it to you anyhow. Favorite place? It's okay to pick a couple.
Thailand. Spent 7 weeks there, and a long time ago, and it blew my mind. Love the people, love the water, love the food, love the views, landscape, the sunsets. Yeah, just fucking spectacular. And then New Zealand. I think it was probably because it's so similar to British Columbia and I hadn't lived in BC yet. But New Zealand, like I moved to British Columbia 2 years after going to New Zealand. I spent a month in New Zealand.
North Island or South Island?
I spent 3 weeks on the South Island and doing some hiking and then a week on the North Island. Loved it all.
Franz Josef Glacier?
I did Franz Josef Glacier, I did the Abel Tasman hike, and I did the Root Burn hike.
Beautiful.
3 night ones. Yeah, it was good.
If you're looking for even more ways to level up your business and your life, we have set up the next video for you. I'll see you over there.